soaked poetry in his head and fell out of the walls that held punk sounds, wandering eyes and watered-down attractions without having a sip of nothing from no one. The night the woman he loved the most, and who he lived days and nights with, chose to leave. Time to visit farms away from this broken plateau which we call home, she stated. Leaves are leaving as he lay woken up in his bed. So now, at 3 a.m., comes the urge to patter up a mountain. This was the only plan, the only action. This boy had desire in his ash-soaked head. Days of having no one to paint just how lost he actually felt had taken its toll on the odd boy. Friends and sellers were always around, but not these days. Seems as if he was removed from his wanderings. His choice. Just didn't want to feel new in some farm. Didn't want to feel far away from what he tossed even further. He knew best. He knew best. A realization came into his eyes. Curiosity was being substituted by having a new bag narcotic, a new option inside his sock. For days now. Yet, never touching it. Just knowing that the reach was there. Substituted curiosity is what he named this bag. As if it were an experimental friend. Nothing else mattered besides self-induced abandonment and being propped up by some option of waltzing out of his mind, all from just reaching into a sock. But it also gave him the fear. See, he never tried these types of thrills. Only curious. Only curious. But it is in his sock. So there he was, looking up from street to mountain inside this summer night, entering dark wilderness, isolating and inviting. Always meant as an explosion of fun for this odd boy and his friends who would rush up and glide down the mountain peak on rusted bikes in the middle of night or the start of some new morning. Feeling a rush in pitch darkness as time vanished. Loved fun. But this was not that time. This was a search for inside hope that may or may not bloom. He went wandering up and up and up through the trees that held memories of the city, through paths that seemed to be made just for him. The hash dripped out of his pores as he reached the top. Another plateau, one could name it. He called it a secluded relief. And then, as the morning hit, early risers were seen at the lookout with paper maps in hand, and that ain't something that he could handle at this time. Ride inside the tree shadows and escape to cliffs that overlook the city. Better to look above something instead of being in it, sometimes. Now he was alone. No figures within sight. Stillness, being still. Glancing at his arms, he was aging by the hour. A feeling that was never experienced before. Look away. Look into the city instead, and be lost. Just as age tells you to be. Was this sadness? Was this the continuation of a depression that would not be welcomed? Get up and continue. The causes never come into mind, only the power is to control it. Get up and continue. But it's hard for someone to admit that they own an emotional twist. Get up and continue. Illusions that cannot be talked about. He always just ate his depression and expected regurgitation like clockwork. Hash burned his fingertips down, and relief caused a crooked smile to appear. Well, it's about time. something wrong here besides what he just kicked away. A new breath and the insight to not control a sigh. As he blew out another breath, the time to leave became clearer. The time to go back home. He felt an epiphany dressed as a second chance. Squinting his hazel eyes, he could see his own home while looking down at the concrete sounds, but the home looked abandoned because it was. And this surprised him. What also surprised him was the urge to reach his hands to someone who shared that cliff, yet no one was next to him. He paused and instead kept his hands caressing the rock. The mountain seemed grateful. The mountain seemed to have made a choice. Even though the boy didn't know what all this resembled, he knew that he had to go home. He stuck to the paths around him to find his way back, a clearing that could reintroduce familiarity, but he got turned around somehow. Strange, since he knew this mountain as a dear friend. Bumps in the path got higher and thicker and made him only see steps ahead. A sense of loss and being lost took over the odd boy who heard nothing but crushed footprints coming from himself. He continued, and he knew that this was not a maze, but a path. And then he went over another bump. Bang. A man stood there. A man right there, just reaching away, standing right there, dressed like the odd boy, styled as the odd boy, framed in appearance alike. But wait, look down. This man was not touching ground. Look up. This man was floating above the earth. A ghost? No, not even close. This man was real, hanging on a tree, with rope around neck, with unraveled tongue, black tongue. Run, turn, run, go find something, and run. Bronchioles hurt. Words out of mouth are altered in an abrupt mental state of nightmare. Nose burns. Chest pushes inside, outside. Leave this morning, nightmare. Leave. The odd boy rushes down the mountain to hear a haze of shock in his brain. As wind rushes around his eyes, he craves the skill to fly, or gallop, or disappear. This is now. This is now. This is nowhere. As he is. Just a dagger pierced inside to make itself present. Unaware of time. Fast. Letting me out of these trees with his shaking teeth. And then, finally, he saw the concrete coming, escaping the mood-soaked mountain. Which way to go? Because now, all he wants is another mountain to go live in, to go play in. He didn't want to go back to the concrete, but the concrete was the only choice. No new mountains in sight. Running away to find a home inside a vicious circle. He arrived back to the street, not as he left. Continue, fast, bouncing along grass to the closest greasy spoon with the intention to sip coffee and forget. If a friend hollered a greeting, this would not be heard. If a friend nods a smoke sign, this ain't being seen. Only his own circulating blood was being felt and heard. He needs to forget. His pale face appeared at the familiar greasy spoon door with intentions of coffee, walking straight into a bathroom to splash water over his eyes. Early morning customers turned heads to stare, and some just looked away. But they all know that this walking oddness is going through a mourning which will never be removed from his life. It's just on his face after all, no matter what the hell happened. He enters the bathroom. The mirror shows the reality. Face soaked with drool, caked, regurgitation. This is not what he wanted to look like in public. Eyes have mutated. And then surprises himself and sticks out his own tongue. And it's alive. It's not unraveled. It's not dead. He kicks the bathroom door open and runs home without any comments, guessing that words would not be ready if he chose to scream what he saw. And then he arrives back home. He leaps up a winding stairwell and is greeted by his pet's eyes. These animals make him pause. They make him realize that there ain't no reason to burst. Just be still. And kick out the scent of a hard life. Be present. Just be present. He walks to the back window and looks up. And there it is. The mountain. It's all there. And every day to come. Can't block this one out. He sits. He cries. He sits. He knows that his own depression was released up there on that cliff. He also knows that the depth of the hangman was bottled up inside without age, releasing nothing. So a candle is lit in each room without the awareness of time. Standing, he suddenly reaches into his sock for some assistance and maybe some more experience in jest. This odd boy who falls from the walls never knew what would make him finally reach into that sock. But it was now. Starting now. There's always a reason. He looks up to the mountain, and the mountain slaps him. But he doesn't have to cry no more. He can smile. His smile drips straight out of his fingertips. But it is a smile. Time is here.